Hello, my name is Michael Santos. I am with Prison Professors. I suspect that you know my partner, Justin Paperney, and of course you know our other famous partner, Sean Hopwood. I just make a lot of videos and content with hopes of helping people prepare themselves for the journey ahead. And today I wanted to make a video on the Quadrant Theory. It is a theory that I used to go by while I was in prison and I used to teach people inside, but I found it is just as applicable out here as I'm building my career in society. And I think it could also be applicable for anybody who is going into the system, who is serving time right now, or who may be on the other side of the journey and trying to recalibrate their life. So before I tell you about the Quadrant Theory, I have to first of all give you some backstory. It would be awesome for me to be able to say that I designed it by myself, but that wouldn't be inaccurate. You see, the reality is, I was lying on the top bunk of one of a federal prison at one point, and I was reading a book. I still remember the book. It was a book by Jim Cramer. I was reading about investments and all, and he spoke a little bit about the Quadrant Theory when he was assessing the risk-reward as he determined whether an investment made sense. And as I read that book, I remember thinking, well, that concept doesn't only apply to financial instruments, it also applies to life. And it certainly applies to everything that I was going through at that particular time, and it is applicable to what I'm doing right now. And it conditions us to be thinking about how we are making decisions in terms of risk, reward, right? So I went to Staples today because I knew I was going to make this video, and I purchased this whiteboard and some paper and unboxing my pens right now. We're going to go ahead and use a black pen for this because we always want to be in the black, right? So let me pull this pen out. And I'm going to take you through the Quadrant Theory, at least how I used to use it, how I used to teach while I was in prison. So we call it here quadrant. And everybody knows, I think, what a quadrant is. And I hope you can read my writing on the wall there. I don't know if it's big enough, but if it's not, the super cool thing is I can blow it up and edit on the post-production phase of this video. So Quadrant Theory, what do we have? We have 4 quads, right? 4 quads. And here we are going to measure risk-reward. And we use that Quadrant Theory when we're making decisions going forward. So in this quadrant up here, we're going to call it high risk, low reward. One quadrant, right? We're going to call that quadrant 1. Okay? Here's quadrant 2. We're going to just invert that. So this is low risk, high reward. High reward. Okay? Let's go to quadrant 3. Down here. Boom, boom, boom. Right? This is going to be high risk, high reward. And here we are finally going to go to low risk, low reward. Right? Okay. Now, not high science, of course. Not high science. But what we can do by looking at this is determine, well, what is an example of high risk, low reward? What is an example of low risk, high reward type of decision making? What is an example of high risk, high reward? And what is an example of low risk, low reward? Okay? So I'm going to go through these different quadrants in terms of decisions that we may make while we are in prison. So first of all, let's talk about an example of a high risk, low reward type of decision. Okay? So in federal prison, I can tell you it's a bit absurd. State prison, the same thing. But what's absurd about it is an individual gets respect in that type of environment, not necessarily in the same ways that an individual gets respect outside in society, right? How does an individual develop respect out here? Well, maybe he's a family man. Maybe he's an individual who started a business and employs many people. Maybe he's an individual who pays a lot of money in taxes. Maybe he's an individual that contributes to his community or his religious organization or to the lives of others. That might be a way that an individual earns respect in society. In prison, it's a lot different, right? Because prison is an unusual environment where an individual with no education, no job, never made any legitimate money, may be the individual who's got the highest level of the highest status in that environment, right? Prison is a very different environment. And how does that play itself out in that environment? It's important to understand that because some people in there really don't think very much about how to become successful out here in society. People think about how do I develop a prison reputation? And one of the ways that they may do that is say, I want to control the television set, for example, right? That's an important subject matter because my whole identity and masculinity is tied to whether I can keep up with the Kardashians or watch the appropriate television show that I want to watch. And it's not even so much about television, it's about letting the rest of the people in the tribe there understand that I am the alpha male in this environment, okay? So if my goal is to become that alpha male, or at least in the television setting, I might pursue some type of decision making that has a very high risk, at least as in my terms, because my objective would be preparing to get out at the soonest possible time, prepared to come back successfully, prepared to come back strong with my dignity intact. But somebody else may value, say, no, I value a prison reputation. And so I'm going to make every decision I am going to make along those lines. Well, by my value standard, that would be a very high risk because you're risking violence, you're risking offending other people in prison because I'm going to do whatever it takes to defend this little bit of territory. But the reward, what is it? You get to turn a television station, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't really move the needle for the individual who is thinking about how am I going to become successful after prison. But in prison, twisted environment. The more you understand it, the better off you are. So I would consider that as an example of behavior in quadrant 1, where there's a very high risk, right? I've got a danger of having a physical altercation with somebody and potentially going to the hole, potentially being charged with another crime, potentially disrupting my family, extending my time in prison, all for what? Low reward of being able to control the television set. I would not call that a very wise decision, but that's because I've got my own, I make values-based, goal-oriented decisions, which is what we suggest that individuals do who are going through our program. And if you want to learn more about that and get in-depth training, I really encourage you to reach out to my partner, Justin Paperny, and he can put you through one of those programs. Now let's talk about low-risk, high-reward. What might that be? Okay, let's do an example of low-risk, high-reward behavior. Okay, quadrant 2. Here's an example. Reading, right? Reading is incredibly valuable, right? It positions us for success. I got my entire education while I was serving 26 years in federal prison. Got an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, published books, built a network of support, all of that while I was in prison, and all from reading, okay? So you read a book, you develop value that lasts for a lifetime. High reward. I just told you, I told you in the previous example about reading Jim Cramer. I read so many books while I was in prison, and I was on a very methodical strategy while I was reading those books. I was always reading with this idea of whatever I read was going to put me on a position for success when I got out. So, you see there's very little risk in reading, right? I can do it anywhere. I could be lying on my rack, reading a book, not bothering anybody, getting massive reward for it. And that is an example of behavior in quadrant 2. Let's talk about quadrant 3. High risk, high reward. How many of you out there think, well, I'm going into prison, I don't want to do anything that's high risk, high reward? You know, maybe, maybe not. I can tell you I was very deliberate through my journey in prison. But every individual is different. Some individuals are of the mindset that I just want to be invisible. And that may make sense, to be invisible while you're in prison. Avoid altercations with other people. In fact, in several of our literature or our books, we write about the concept of the submarine, going through prison like you are a submarine. You want to be under the current, right? So nobody knows what's going on, what you're doing. You kind of want to be invisible. You've got your periscope up so you can see what's going on around you, but you are out of the fray, right? Be invisible. Be a submarine. But sometimes it may make sense to come out and pursue high risk, high reward behavior. And I will give you an example of that. For those of you who haven't read my book, Earning Freedom, you won't know this story, but if you'd like to learn how I made $1 million while I was in prison, you can get that story in Earning Freedom. Now, to make $1 million in society is kind of tough, right? Not impossible, but kind of tough. Not too many people do it. But to do it from while you're in federal prison, that's awesome, okay? High risk to do that, right? It's a high risk, high reward. How did I do it? Well, I studied the markets, did a lot of stock trading while I was in prison. I understood the rules, and I understood how to position myself to maneuver around the rules. I understood that there is a huge difference between a law that Congress has to pass and the president has to sign, and a policy, which is the Bureau of Prisons policy. So the policy in prison is that an individual cannot run a business. But that's not the law. Okay? So there is a difference, and that's why I would really encourage you to understand the nuances of prison. If you're going to hire a prison expert or somebody to help guide you, I really recommend that you hire Justin Paperny with Prison Professors. He's my partner, but I can tell you that I absolutely vouch for everything that he is doing because I wrote, this is like what he teaches is what I live for 26 years, and it helped me get through that journey, and it helped me become successful outside. And if it was only me, you might say, oh yeah, well, you were lucky, but countless other people. I mean, look at our partner, Sean Hopwood. He was a bank robber, armed bank robber, served more than a decade in prison, and now he's not only a lawyer, but he's a law professor and an advisor to the president of the White House on criminal justice reform. So, there is a pattern of people who pursue this values-based, goal-oriented strategy that Justin can teach you that will really help you come back successfully. And I know that there are, anybody can come out of prison, hang up a shingle and say that they are a prison expert and can help you. You're watching this video on YouTube. Anybody can put anything up on YouTube. They can get out there and talk about how successful they are and how awesome they are, But I would really encourage you, do your due diligence. You should find somebody who's the best in the world at what they do. And I vouch for Justin, and I hope that you will learn from him so that you will understand when, and if it's appropriate to pursue behavior in Quadrant 3. High risk, high reward. Justin can talk with you about that. What are some examples that I can tell you of Justin that took some high risk, high reward? While he was going through his sentence in prison, we worked very closely developing a series of coursework that is now part of the Prison Professor's curriculum. You've probably read his book, Lessons from Prison. All of that was done while we were sitting side by side inside of a federal prison. What's the reward? Well, he's built $1 million consulting business out of that. And I would submit that, yeah, there was a bit of risk, because you're not supposed to be doing some of those things while you're in prison. Was there a reward? Absolutely. He's supporting his family. He understood what he was doing. He lived a values-based, goal-oriented approach, and I wholly support that. But it's certainly writing books and publishing books and throwing blogs up and things of that sort. That's riskier than reading a book, okay? Just understand what you're doing. Make deliberate decisions. Finally, low risk, low reward. Let's get an example of that. Low risk, low reward. Let's say that we spend all of our time walking around the track. Now that can have some health benefits. Let me just think. Spend all of your time just sitting in a chair watching television. You don't change the channel. You don't make any news. Somebody asks you for the seat. You're more than happy to give them the seat. Low risk, low reward. You're just hanging out. you're really just serving time. Is it the best way to do things? In my mind, no. Avoid behavior in quadrant 4. Avoid behavior in quadrant 1. These are no, never, okay? Here, no, never. Be deliberate, okay? Most of the time, right? Most of the time, right here. That's where you want to be. Sometimes, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know your situation. I don't know the values you live by. I don't know the goals that you're pursuing. But I do know this. If you work with our team, if you work with Justin and the team that we have put together, if you go through our courses, you are not going to be just serving time, right? You are going to be putting yourself on a pathway to success. And the sooner you get started, the better off you are. If you haven't been sentenced yet, then you could apply all of these quadrant theories to your decision of how well you are going to prepare yourself to get ready for sentencing. If you've been sentenced, you need to be thinking about what can you do while you're in there to emerge successfully. You want to emerge in mediocrity? Well, get advice from somebody who's done nothing more than become mediocre. You want to be successful? Get advice from people who are the best in the world at what they do. I would love to work with you closely one-on-one, but I don't have the time because I'm out here making money, right? But we've got our friends, Justin, who's coordinating a team. We've got great content that will help you become the best in the world at what you want to become. And I really hope that you will seize the initiative. Contact Justin. You can reach him right down here, this banner that I put below every video, right? That's his phone number. That's his email. You want to emerge successfully from prison, make sure you hit that up. But if you want to be successful when you come home, now, that's when you might want to visit Prison to Paradise and you can get a free copy of my book just by going to prisontoparadise.com. But this is about prison professors, and I hope that you will take action and reach out to my friends Justin and Sean and the whole team that is behind them, because they can help you make get a better outcome than what you've been experiencing so far. I am Michael with Prison Professors. I want to thank you for giving me your time, and I want you to remember it all begins with attitude, and I hope that you have the right attitude. Contact Justin Paperny at 818-424-2220, and you can get on your path to putting the challenges behind you and begin preparing for success. Thank you.